Roberts is an awarded poet, editor, and author. Her novel, Serpent's Wake, A Tale for the Bitten, is a notable work with the HWA's Mental Health Initiative. She co-edited We Are Providence, which made the Bram Stoker Awards preliminary ballot and is currently shortlisted for an Aurealis Award. Take it away, L.E.
I'll also start my stopwatch here. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us this evening. And this morning. I'm thrilled to be here. I'll be reading from a story also called Silk, from the Hush, Don't Wake the Monster anthology, which is a Stephen King tribute. And we were asked to align a Stephen King story as our inspiration and then springboard into our own story. So I chose The Mangler, which was published in his 78 Night Shift collection. If you're familiar with the story, it's about an industrial laundry press exposed to a series of elements: nightshade, a bat, the blood of a virgin, summoning a demon that possesses the machine, and it breaks free and inflicts violence upon its workers. My kind of jam. So this is a horror story. I was inspired also by my grandmother, who was the child of Italian immigrants and survived polio, and found herself working in a silk mill as a child. It was her first job at age 5. Silk. And I'll be popping through a couple of timelines here. So first, 2010. The Carriage House home for aged women in Spectacle Cove, Rhode Island. Memory is a bloody thing when you've lived snarled with secrets too long. As you watch the light change before sunset from your bed, everything you willed to forget gathers to dissect you to the bone. A dull headache looms, your mouth cottons, and the stool softeners worm their way around your guts. Still, before it grows dark, you think of a son who doesn't visit, but pays for a bed beside the window where the bay shines gold. It gives you something to look at besides yourself, and you watch the sifting sea as if through a telescope from the moon. With hearing aids out of reach on the bedside table, the low pulse of what's left of sound is punctuated by distant screams, and your heart responds with a shudder. Your fellow residents are howling. Sundowners, their psychotic episodes plume as the sunlight fades. Like them, you're receding from this life piece by piece, but one thing tethers you to this bed. One thing anchors you more than the husband you didn't know how to live with and learned to live without for more than 60 years, more than the guilt of being a less than willing mother and a disinterested son to prove it, more than spending a lifetime on factory floors envious of anyone with a high school degree. A swift shape shoots past the window. You startle. The pain jostles your spine. Even with dimming eyes, you know it was a barn swallow barreling into the eaves, and you swear you can hear the rattle of it roosting for the night. Like the shadows now spreading on a dark purple bay, something calls to you, a thick, viscous groan, forcing you to remember the sacrifices you made one by one to the endless dark. In 1915, you were 5. You had survived polio, but your feet were warped. You spent the summer at your mother's side within the great thrumming halls of Kimball's Silk Mill of South Kingston, coaxing pale filaments from wet cocoons after the caterpillars were boiled alive. I skip a portion here. 5 years later, after a short, difficult time at school, you return to the mill and join the night shift with your mother, ensuring silk threads never broke, feeding rows upon rows of spools that never stopped twirling in their hunger for more. Your mother ran a line of looms through the night while you clopped along the wooden floor in oversized boots. A few months into your job, when the moon shined dusty and fat through the long factory windows, you were replacing the spools when a peculiar movement in the rafters caught your eye. You paused at your cart. A little bird twitched in the beams above the clattering machines. It was panting, revealing a mouth the color of marigold. You knew that if that bird pooped into the silk threads below, the damage would be docked from your pay. It fidgeted on the beam, and you saw from its dark points that it was a swallow. You threw open the mill windows against the moon-soaked night, and when Nicky, the sweeper boy, circled a row of machines trying to look busy with his broom, You signaled him. "Nicky," you shouted over the din. "Get a ladder." You held his ladder steady against a pillar while Nick climbed with fluff and lint stuck all over his woolen short pants, his rump in your face. You passed his broom up to his waiting hand. Nick swung at the bird, hitting it harder than you'd hoped. It fell, stiff with terror, black, shiny button eyes flashing as it tumbled into the web of wriggling threads, tangled into taut wires of silk, little wings twisting asunder. The spools spun, twirling and whirling, and the bird rolled, ugly in its writhing and threatening to pop several silk threads all at once. Swiftly, you left the ladder and reached into the shivering threads for the bird. You turned just in time to see Nick fall hard against the wooden slats of the mill floor, the ladder crashing on top of him. Cradling his head, Nick revealed bright red fingertips as blood oozed and dripped into the floorboards, and when he stumbled to his feet, he left a crimson smear where he fell. Billy, the floorman, appeared out of nowhere and caught Nick as he staggered. "You two palookas," Billy shook Nick by the shoulder. "What is this mess?" "A bird." You reached into the threads again, your heart pounding. Nick looked like he was fighting off tears. Billy touched his head and sent him home. The row of machinery paused for a whole of 60 seconds. The stillness around you was like a church, even though the other rows were humming. You parted the threads to tease the broken bird free so it could die in your hands. When the machinery heaved once again into action, a hiss filled the air and you were terrified. The floorman would blame you, but he didn't. He just pointed to the feathery mess in your hands and said, "Don't take it home and eat it. I know what you guineas are like. Clean up the floor." Billy walked away from you, taking the ladder with him. The bird in your hand was soft and warm, and Nick's blood on the floor shone bright red. You bent closer to look. It was swirling. It was cascading down like a drain. The floor hadn't seen a lick of oil in ages, and it was pulling the blood right down into its pith. Peering closer, you felt something heave like a ripple in the air or across the walls. You weren't sure, but when you looked up, the machines whirled faster and spun cleanly without any evidence of disaster. You pocketed the bird, and by the time you returned with a bucket and brush, the bloodstains were gone. You stood there in disbelief, wondering, did you have the right aisle? You did, but at the end of your shift, there were 60 spools over the usual count, all feeding into the looms in your mother's section. I'll stop there and just hold up my giveaway. I have 2 copies of We Are Providence, which is up for the Australian Aurealis Award currently as a finalist. One for someone maybe in the Australia Pacific area and one for anywhere overseas. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, ladies, for putting this together.